Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a recent applicant to Alberto Hurtado University has formally appealed their entrance exam score, alleging a procedural error in the administration of the test that they believe unfairly impacted their performance. According to the Alberto Hurtado University's internal regulations for admissions and appeals, what is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee to take? Option A. Immediately offer the applicant a chance to retake the entrance examination, or provide them with preferential consideration for admission to compensate for the alleged procedural error. Option B. Inform the applicant that exam results are final and that no appeals are considered, as per standard university practice for entrance examinations. Option C. Conduct an informal discussion with the applicant to understand their concerns and offer a general assurance that the university strives for fairness, without initiating a formal review process. Option D. Initiate a formal review of the applicant's appeal by convening the designated appeals committee, examining the specific procedural error alleged against the university's established testing protocols, and communicating the outcome based on the findings and university policy. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal review of the applicant's appeal by convening the designated appeals committee, examining the specific procedural error alleged against the university's established testing protocols, and communicating the outcome based on the findings and university policy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the university's commitment to academic integrity and the need to respond effectively to student concerns. The university entrance exam is a critical gateway, and any perceived unfairness or procedural error can have significant consequences for applicants and the institution's reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for a fair and transparent admissions process with the efficient and timely resolution of appeals. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented review process that adheres strictly to the established appeals procedure outlined by the Alberto Hurtado University. This approach is right because it upholds the principles of due process and fairness for all applicants. By following the defined steps, the university ensures that appeals are considered objectively, based on the evidence presented and the exam regulations. This transparency builds trust in the admissions process and demonstrates the university's commitment to its own policies. Specifically, referencing the internal regulations of Alberto Hurtado University for appeals ensures that the process is consistent, predictable, and legally sound within the university's own framework. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the student's concerns without a formal review, citing the finality of exam results. This fails to acknowledge the possibility of genuine errors and disregards the university's obligation to provide a mechanism for addressing such issues. It also risks alienating applicants and potentially facing reputational damage if the perceived unfairness becomes widely known. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct an informal, ad hoc review without adhering to the established appeals procedure. This lacks the necessary documentation and transparency, making it difficult to justify the outcome and potentially opening the university to accusations of bias or inconsistency. It also bypasses the established channels designed to ensure fairness and thoroughness. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately offer a re-examination or special consideration without a proper investigation into the student's specific claims. While seemingly accommodating, this could set a precedent for preferential treatment and undermine the integrity of the original examination process. It fails to address the root cause of the student's concern and may not be equitable to other applicants. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to understanding and applying the university's internal regulations and policies governing admissions and appeals. Professionals should prioritize fairness, transparency, and due process. This involves establishing clear procedures, ensuring they are communicated to all stakeholders, and consistently applying them. When faced with a complaint, the first step is always to consult the relevant internal guidelines and to follow the prescribed process meticulously. This structured approach ensures that decisions are defensible, ethical, and aligned with the institution's values and regulatory obligations. Question 2. Regulatory review indicates that the Alberto Hurtado University Entrance Exam Admissions Committee is evaluating a candidate whose academic transcripts from a previous institution appear to have minor discrepancies in grading scales compared to the university's standard. The committee is considering whether to request additional clarification from the candidate's former institution or to proceed with an interpretation based on the available information. Which of the following actions best aligns with the principles of regulatory compliance for university entrance exams? Option A. Adjusting the candidate's scores downwards to account for the perceived difference in grading rigor without seeking clarification or official documentation. Option B. Requesting official documentation from the candidate's former institution to clarify the grading scale discrepancies and ensure an accurate assessment of their academic record against the university's admission criteria. Option C. Proceeding with an interpretation of the grading scale based on the committee's general understanding of international grading systems, assuming the discrepancies are minor. Option D. Deferring the decision until the candidate can provide a personal explanation for the grading scale differences without seeking external verification. Correct answer is B. Requesting official documentation from the candidate's former institution to clarify the grading scale discrepancies and ensure an accurate assessment of their academic record against the university's admission criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between upholding academic integrity and the potential for misinterpreting or misapplying university admission policies. The admissions committee must exercise careful judgment to ensure fairness and adherence to established guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of all submitted documentation against the established criteria for the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam. This ensures that decisions are based on verifiable facts and the explicit requirements of the examination regulation, thereby upholding the principle of equal opportunity and the integrity of the admission process. This aligns with the university's commitment to a transparent and merit-based selection process, as implicitly required by any formal examination framework. An incorrect approach that prioritizes anecdotal evidence or personal biases over documented qualifications fails to adhere to the objective standards set by the university. This could lead to unfair admissions and undermine the credibility of the entrance exam. Another incorrect approach that involves making exceptions without clear, documented justification based on policy deviations would also be a failure. Such actions could be seen as arbitrary and inconsistent with the regulatory framework governing the exam, potentially opening the university to challenges regarding procedural fairness. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing regulations and policies. They should then gather and objectively assess all relevant evidence, comparing it directly against these established criteria. Any ambiguities or potential exceptions should be addressed through established appeal or review processes, ensuring that decisions are consistently applied and defensible. Question 3. Consider a scenario where a student preparing for the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam receives significant assistance from a tutor on a practice essay question. The tutor has provided detailed feedback and suggested specific phrasing that the student is considering incorporating directly into their own response for the actual exam, without explicitly mentioning the tutor's contribution. What is the most appropriate course of action for the student to ensure compliance with the university's academic integrity standards? Option A. The student should consult with the professor or examination administrator to clarify the acceptable boundaries of external assistance for essay questions and understand how to properly attribute any incorporated ideas or phrasing. Option B. The student should discard the tutor's suggestions entirely and rewrite the essay from scratch to avoid any potential issues, even if it means not benefiting from valuable feedback. Option C. The student should incorporate the tutor's suggestions directly into the essay, assuming that such assistance is a normal part of preparation and does not constitute academic misconduct. Option D. The student should submit the essay with the tutor's suggested phrasing without seeking any further clarification, believing that the tutor's input is a form of personal study. The correct answer is A. The student should consult with the professor or examination administrator to clarify the acceptable boundaries of external assistance for essay questions and understand how to properly attribute any incorporated ideas or phrasing. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to present their work and the university's established academic integrity policies. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that any submitted work is original and properly attributed, thereby upholding the academic standards of Alberto Hurtado University. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate collaboration and academic misconduct. The correct approach involves the student seeking explicit guidance from the professor regarding the acceptable level of assistance for the specific assignment. This aligns with the principles of academic honesty and the regulatory framework of the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam, which emphasizes originality and proper citation. By proactively communicating with the instructor, the student demonstrates a commitment to understanding and adhering to the university's academic integrity policies. This approach ensures that the student receives clarification on what constitutes acceptable collaboration versus plagiarism, thereby safeguarding their academic standing and the integrity of the examination process. An incorrect approach would be for the student to proceed with the assignment without clarifying the boundaries of collaboration, especially after receiving external help that might be considered substantial. This failure to seek clarification directly violates the spirit of academic integrity and the explicit guidelines of the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam, which prohibits submitting work that is not entirely one's own or is improperly attributed. Such an action could be construed as an attempt to gain an unfair advantage or to circumvent the assessment of individual knowledge and skills. Another incorrect approach would be for the student to submit the assignment with the external assistance incorporated without any disclosure or acknowledgement. This constitutes plagiarism, a severe breach of academic ethics and university regulations. The regulatory framework of the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam explicitly condemns plagiarism, and submitting work that is not original, even if partially, undermines the validity of the assessment and the credibility of the university. A third incorrect approach would be for the student to ignore the potential ethical implications and simply submit the work as is, assuming that the external help was minor or inconsequential. This demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and in disregard for the university's commitment to academic honesty. The entrance exam's framework requires a proactive understanding and application of ethical principles, not a passive acceptance of potentially compromised work. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policies. When in doubt about the permissibility of any form of assistance or collaboration, the professional course of action is always to seek clarification from the relevant authority, in this case, the professor or the examination board. This proactive communication ensures that all parties are aligned with the expectations and standards, thereby preventing potential breaches of academic honesty and upholding the integrity of the educational process. Question 4. The control framework reveals a situation during the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam where a proctor observes a candidate exhibiting behavior strongly suggestive of cheating, such as discreetly looking at notes hidden under their exam paper. The proctor is aware of the university's strict academic integrity policies, but also feels a sense of empathy for the candidate who appears visibly stressed. What is the most appropriate course of action for the proctor to take in accordance with the regulatory framework governing university entrance examinations? Option A. Immediately confiscate the candidate's exam materials and escort them out of the examination hall. Option B. Provide the candidate with a subtle hint or clarification to help them overcome their apparent difficulty, thereby preventing potential failure. Option C. Discreetly inform the candidate that their behavior is being observed and advise them to stop without further action. Option D. Document the observed behavior in detail and report it to the designated examination supervisor or academic integrity office for formal review. The correct answer is C. Discreetly inform the candidate that their behavior is being observed and advise them to stop without further action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between maintaining academic integrity and responding to a student's plea for assistance. The university's entrance exam is a critical gatekeeper, and any compromise to its fairness or validity undermines the credibility of the institution and the value of the qualifications it confers. The pressure to assist a student, especially one who appears to be struggling, is understandable, but it must be balanced against the overarching responsibility to uphold the integrity of the examination process. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the established protocols for handling suspected academic misconduct during an entrance exam. This means documenting the observed behavior, reporting it to the designated authority, e.g., the examination proctor or academic integrity office, and allowing the official process to unfold. This approach is ethically and regulatorily justified because it ensures a fair and impartial evaluation for all candidates. It upholds the principles of academic honesty, prevents unfair advantages, and maintains the credibility of the Alberto Hurtado University's entrance examination. The university's regulations, as is standard for such institutions, would mandate a clear procedure for addressing suspected cheating, prioritizing due process and evidence-based decision-making. An incorrect approach would be to directly intervene and provide the student with answers or hints. This action, while seemingly helpful in the moment, constitutes direct complicity in academic dishonesty. It violates the fundamental principle of fair assessment and directly contravenes any university regulations designed to prevent cheating. Such an action would not only compromise the integrity of the exam for all other candidates, but also expose the individual intervening to disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed behavior and take no action. This passive stance, while avoiding direct involvement in misconduct, still fails to uphold the responsibility to maintain a fair examination environment. It implicitly condones the potential for cheating and can lead to a perception that the university does not take academic integrity seriously. This inaction is a failure to adhere to the spirit, if not the letter, of regulations that require vigilance in safeguarding the examination process. A further incorrect approach would be to discuss the observed behavior with other students or staff in a manner that could be construed as gossip or prejudgment. While seeking advice might be appropriate, public or informal discussion can create an atmosphere of suspicion and undermine the confidentiality required during an investigation. It also risks spreading misinformation and potentially prejudicing the outcome before any formal review. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policies. When faced with suspected misconduct, the professional must prioritize reporting the incident through the designated channels. This involves objective observation, factual documentation, and timely notification of the appropriate authorities. The focus should always be on facilitating a fair and transparent process, rather than making unilateral decisions or taking actions that could compromise the integrity of the examination. Question 5. The investigation demonstrates that an applicant for the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam has submitted a project that they claim is entirely their original work, developed independently over several months. However, a preliminary review suggests potential similarities to publicly available research papers on a related topic. The admissions committee must decide how to proceed. Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's project, comparing it against the university's academic integrity policies and relevant academic databases to verify originality and proper attribution. Option B. Seek advice from external academic integrity consultants not affiliated with the university to determine the validity of the applicant's project. Option C. Immediately disqualify the applicant for suspected plagiarism, given the preliminary indication of similarities. Option D. Accept the project at face value, trusting the applicant's assertion of originality without further verification. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's project, comparing it against the university's academic integrity policies and relevant academic databases to verify originality and proper attribution. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to present their work and the university's academic integrity policies. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing the encouragement of student initiative with the imperative to uphold ethical standards and prevent plagiarism. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the student's submitted work against the university's established academic integrity guidelines and the specific requirements of the entrance exam. This approach is justified by the Alberto Hurtado University's commitment to academic honesty, as outlined in its regulations. Specifically, the university's framework mandates that all submitted work must be original and properly attributed. By verifying the originality of the student's project and ensuring it adheres to the exam's stated parameters, the admissions committee upholds the integrity of the evaluation process and ensures a fair assessment for all applicants. This aligns with the ethical principle of fairness and the regulatory requirement for due diligence in admissions. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disqualify the student based on a superficial assumption of plagiarism without investigation. This fails to adhere to the principle of due process, which is implicitly part of fair evaluation. It also neglects the university's regulatory obligation to investigate potential academic misconduct thoroughly before making a judgment. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the project without any verification, assuming the student's claim of originality is sufficient. This would violate the university's responsibility to ensure the authenticity of submitted work and could lead to an unfair advantage for the student, undermining the integrity of the entrance exam. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to consult external, non-university sources for guidance on plagiarism detection without referencing the Alberto Hurtado University's specific policies. This disregards the exclusive jurisdiction of the university's own regulatory framework for its entrance examinations. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic approach. First, clearly understanding the university's academic integrity policies and the specific requirements of the assessment. Second, gathering all relevant information about the student's submission. Third, conducting a fair and impartial investigation, utilizing university-approved methods for verifying originality. Fourth, applying the university's policies consistently to the findings. Finally, documenting the entire process and the rationale for the decision. Question 6. The analysis reveals that a member of the Alberto Hurtado University Admissions Committee has received an informal inquiry from a senior faculty member, who is not part of the committee, regarding the academic background and personal circumstances of a specific applicant. The faculty member states they are curious about the applicant's potential fit for a research project. The admissions committee member is aware of the applicant's strong academic record, but also some sensitive personal information that was disclosed in the application. Which of the following actions best upholds the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam admissions process? Option A. Forward the applicant's complete application file to the faculty member via personal email, suggesting they review it to determine the applicant's suitability for their research project. Option B. Discuss the applicant's personal circumstances in general terms with the faculty member, emphasizing that while the applicant is academically strong, there are some personal challenges that might affect their suitability for intensive research. Option C. Politely decline the faculty member's request, stating that all applicant information is confidential and can only be discussed within the official admissions committee, and offer to forward the faculty member to the appropriate university office for general information on the admissions process if they have broader inquiries. Option D. Share the applicant's academic achievements and relevant personal circumstances with the faculty member, explaining that it is important for faculty to be aware of promising candidates for research opportunities. The correct answer is C. Politely decline the faculty member's request, stating that all applicant information is confidential and can only be discussed within the official admissions committee, and offer to forward the faculty member to the appropriate university office for general information on the admissions process if they have broader inquiries. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in academic settings, ensuring the integrity of the admissions process while adhering to the specific regulations and ethical guidelines of the Alberto Hurtado University. The core professional challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to fair and transparent admissions with the need to protect sensitive applicant information and uphold the reputation of the institution. Misjudgments in this area can lead to legal repercussions, damage to the university's standing, and unfair disadvantages for applicants. The correct approach involves a strict adherence to the established protocols for handling applicant data and the admissions review process, as defined by the Alberto Hurtado University's internal regulations and any applicable Chilean higher education laws. This means that any information shared or discussed must be done through official channels, with authorized personnel, and strictly for the purpose of evaluating applications. The ethical imperative is to maintain confidentiality and prevent any undue influence or bias in the selection process. This approach is justified by the university's commitment to meritocracy and equal opportunity, which are foundational principles of its admissions policy. An incorrect approach would be to bypass official channels or share applicant information with individuals not directly involved in the admissions committee. For instance, discussing an applicant's personal circumstances with a faculty member outside the committee, even with good intentions, violates confidentiality and introduces a risk of bias. Another incorrect approach would be to use informal communication methods, such as personal email or social media, to share application details, which undermines the security and integrity of the data. These actions fail to comply with the university's data protection policies and ethical standards for admissions, potentially leading to breaches of privacy and unfair treatment of applicants. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's admissions policy and data privacy guidelines. When faced with a request or situation that seems to deviate from these norms, a professional should 1. Identify the relevant university policies and regulations. 2. Assess the potential impact of any proposed action on applicant privacy and the fairness of the admissions process. 3. Consult with the designated admissions authority or legal counsel if there is any ambiguity. 4. Prioritize adherence to established procedures and ethical principles above informal requests or personal inclinations. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that developing a new, more comprehensive entrance exam for Alberto Hurtado University could potentially attract a wider range of candidates. However, the current regulatory framework for the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam strictly mandates that all questions and their justifications must exclusively reference and adhere to the laws, regulations, and guidelines specific to this university's entrance examination process, without any reference to external or generic regulatory bodies. Considering this, which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory compliance requirement for generating questions for this specific exam? Option A. Create questions that incorporate comparative analysis of different national educational assessment regulations, highlighting best practices from various international bodies to foster a more globally aware applicant pool. Option B. Design questions that require candidates to perform complex calculations and statistical analyses related to exam performance, as this demonstrates a higher level of analytical rigor and is a common feature in many advanced academic assessments. Option C. Develop questions that draw upon a broad understanding of general principles of educational assessment, referencing common regulatory themes found in university entrance exams globally to ensure a robust evaluation. Option D. Generate questions that strictly focus on the conceptual application of the Alberto Hurtado University's established entrance exam guidelines, ensuring all references and justifications are confined solely to this specific regulatory framework and topic. The correct answer is C. Develop questions that draw upon a broad understanding of general principles of educational assessment, referencing common regulatory themes found in university entrance exams globally, to ensure a robust evaluation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of how to apply the principles of regulatory compliance within the specific context of university entrance examinations, as governed by the Alberto Hurtado University's established framework. The core difficulty lies in discerning which approach aligns with the ethical and procedural guidelines mandated for such assessments, ensuring fairness and integrity. The correct approach involves prioritizing the adherence to the explicit instructions and limitations set forth by the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam regulations. This means strictly confining responses and question generation to the specified jurisdiction and topic, and crucially, avoiding any deviation or introduction of external regulatory frameworks. This is ethically and regulatorily justified because the exam's purpose is to assess an applicant's knowledge and adherence to its own defined parameters. Introducing or referencing other jurisdictions or regulatory bodies would demonstrate a failure to comprehend or respect the exam's specific requirements, potentially compromising the validity of the assessment. An incorrect approach would be to incorporate regulations or guidelines from other countries or generic regulatory terms. This fails to meet the absolute priority requirement of adhering only to the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exams framework. Such an approach indicates a lack of attention to detail and an inability to follow precise instructions, which are fundamental professional skills. Another incorrect approach would be to create a question that is primarily mathematical or calculation-focused, as the prompt explicitly states the need to avoid such questions and focus on conceptual understanding. This demonstrates a misunderstanding of the question's constraints and the desired analytical depth. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a meticulous review of all instructions and constraints before commencing any task. Professionals must actively identify and internalize the specific jurisdictional boundaries, thematic limitations, and formatting requirements. When faced with ambiguity, seeking clarification is paramount. In this context, the decision-making process would involve recognizing the absolute priority of the specified exam's regulatory framework and ensuring that all outputs strictly conform to it, thereby demonstrating competence and integrity. Question 8. To address the challenge of accurately presenting one's qualifications for the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam, an applicant has a past minor academic infraction that was resolved internally by their previous institution. The applicant is unsure whether to disclose this infraction, as it was not a formal expulsion or suspension. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of academic integrity and ethical application? Option A. Exaggerate the applicant's role and impact in a volunteer project to make their extracurricular profile appear more substantial. Option B. Honestly and fully disclose the past minor academic infraction, providing any necessary context or explanation as permitted by the application. Option C. Seek advice from current students on how to present past experiences in the most favorable light, even if it involves subtle embellishments. Option D. Omit any mention of the past minor academic infraction, assuming that since it was not a severe disciplinary action, it is not relevant to the current application. The correct answer is B. Honestly and fully disclose the past minor academic infraction, providing any necessary context or explanation as permitted by the application. Explanation. The scenario presents a common ethical dilemma faced by university applicants: the temptation to misrepresent qualifications to gain an advantage. This is professionally challenging because it tests an applicant's integrity, honesty, and understanding of academic and professional ethical standards. The Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam, like any reputable academic institution, places a high value on these principles. Misrepresentation, even if seemingly minor, undermines the fairness of the admissions process and can have long-term consequences for both the applicant and the institution. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and in compliance with the university's stated guidelines. The correct approach involves a commitment to absolute honesty and transparency in all submitted application materials. This means accurately reflecting one's academic achievements, extracurricular involvement, and any other information requested by the university. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of academic integrity and honesty, which are implicitly and often explicitly stipulated in university entrance regulations and codes of conduct. By providing truthful information, the applicant demonstrates respect for the admissions process and the university's commitment to admitting qualified individuals based on genuine merit. This upholds the trust placed in applicants and ensures a fair evaluation for all. An incorrect approach that involves exaggerating participation in extracurricular activities is ethically flawed because it constitutes a form of deception. This misrepresents the applicant's actual level of engagement and commitment, thereby misleading the admissions committee about their profile. This violates the principle of honesty and can be seen as an attempt to gain an unfair advantage over other applicants who have accurately reported their experiences. Another incorrect approach, which is to omit relevant information about a past academic disciplinary issue, is also ethically unacceptable. This omission is a form of dishonesty by concealment. It deprives the admissions committee of crucial information that may be relevant to assessing the applicant's character, responsibility, and suitability for the university. Failing to disclose such information breaches the trust expected of applicants and can lead to severe consequences if discovered, including rescission of admission. A third incorrect approach, which is to seek advice from current students on how to spin or reframe past experiences to appear more impressive, is problematic. While seeking advice is not inherently wrong, the intent to spin or reframe suggests an intention to distort the truth rather than present it accurately. This can easily cross the line into misrepresentation, as it prioritizes perception over factual accuracy. The focus should be on presenting genuine experiences truthfully, not on creating a misleading narrative. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough review of the university's application guidelines and any stated code of conduct. Applicants should then honestly assess their own qualifications and experiences against these requirements. If there is any doubt about how to present information accurately, it is advisable to seek clarification directly from the university's admissions office. The guiding principle should always be to prioritize truthfulness and integrity, understanding that long-term academic and professional success is built on a foundation of honesty. Question 9. The review process indicates that a candidate for the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam has submitted an essay that bears striking similarities to published work, raising concerns about potential academic dishonesty. According to the university's internal regulations concerning academic integrity and the entrance examination guidelines, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Proceed with the candidate's admission while flagging the essay for future review by the Academic Integrity Office. Option B. Request the candidate to rewrite the essay under supervised conditions before a final decision is made. Option C. Immediately disqualify the candidate from the entrance exam based on the suspicion of plagiarism. Option D. Initiate a formal investigation into the alleged plagiarism, informing the candidate and providing them with an opportunity to respond, in accordance with university policy. Correct answer is A. Proceed with the candidate's admission while flagging the essay for future review by the Academic Integrity Office. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to present their work and the university's commitment to academic integrity. The entrance exam process, particularly at a reputable institution like Alberto Hurtado University, demands a rigorous and fair evaluation of all candidates. The challenge lies in upholding these standards while also considering the specific circumstances of a candidate. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate support and academic misconduct. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation of the alleged plagiarism, adhering strictly to the Alberto Hurtado University's established academic integrity policies and procedures. This means gathering evidence, providing the candidate with an opportunity to respond, and making a decision based on the university's defined criteria for academic misconduct. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it prioritizes fairness, due process, and the integrity of the admission process, as mandated by the university's internal regulations and the broader principles of academic honesty. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disqualify the candidate without a proper investigation. This fails to uphold the principle of due process, which is fundamental to fair evaluation. It also risks penalizing a student based on an unsubstantiated accusation, potentially leading to an unjust outcome and reputational damage to the university. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the allegation and proceed with the admission as if nothing happened. This undermines the university's commitment to academic integrity and sets a dangerous precedent, suggesting that such issues can be overlooked. It also fails to address a potential breach of the university's academic honesty code, which is a core regulatory requirement for all university processes. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence-based assessment, adherence to established policies, and fairness. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting all allegations promptly. 2. Initiating a formal investigation process, as outlined by university policy. 3. Ensuring the candidate is informed of the allegations and given a fair opportunity to present their case. 4. Consulting relevant university regulations and academic integrity guidelines. 5. Making a decision based on the findings of the investigation and the university's established disciplinary procedures. 6. Maintaining confidentiality throughout the process. Question 10. What factors determine the most effective preparation strategy for the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam, considering its specific regulatory framework and assessment objectives? Option A. Memorizing a wide range of general academic facts and theories from various subjects without specific regard to their relevance or application within the exam's format. Option B. Focusing on covering the largest possible volume of study material in the shortest amount of time, aiming for breadth over depth of understanding. Option C. A comprehensive analysis of the university's official admission guidelines, past exam structures, where permissible, and the stated pedagogical goals of the Alberto Hurtado University to tailor study content and methods. Option D. Following unofficial study guides and hot tips circulated among prospective students, prioritizing popular but unverified preparation techniques. correct answer is C. A comprehensive analysis of the university's official admission guidelines, past exam structures, where permissible, and the stated pedagogical goals of the Alberto Hurtado University to tailor study content and methods. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only an understanding of the Alberto Hurtado University's entrance exam requirements, but also the ability to critically evaluate how different preparation strategies align with the exam's stated objectives and regulatory framework. The challenge lies in discerning which approach is most likely to lead to success within the specific context of this university's admissions process, which is governed by its own internal regulations and the broader educational policies of Chile. Careful judgment is required to avoid superficial or misaligned preparation methods. The correct approach involves a comprehensive understanding of the exam structure, content areas, and the underlying pedagogical philosophy of the Alberto Hurtado University. This means actively seeking out official documentation, past exam analyses, if available and permitted, and understanding the university's mission and values as reflected in its entrance exam. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the exam's stated purpose and the university's expectations. It prioritizes alignment with the specific requirements, ensuring that preparation efforts are targeted and relevant, thereby maximizing the likelihood of demonstrating the knowledge and skills the university seeks. This aligns with the ethical principle of honesty and integrity in the application process, by engaging with the process as intended. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on memorizing broad academic facts without understanding their application or relevance to the exam's specific format fails, because it neglects the evaluative nature of an entrance exam. Entrance exams often test critical thinking and problem-solving skills, not just rote memorization. This approach risks preparing for the wrong kind of knowledge or assessment. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal advice or unverified tips from peers or unofficial sources is problematic because it bypasses the official regulatory framework and guidelines set by the university. Such advice may be outdated, inaccurate, or specific to a different exam or context, leading to wasted effort and a misunderstanding of what is truly being assessed. This can also be seen as a failure to engage with the process in good faith. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed and volume of study over depth and understanding is also flawed. Entrance exams, especially at the university level, are designed to assess a certain level of comprehension and analytical ability. Rushing through material without proper assimilation will likely result in superficial knowledge that cannot be effectively applied during the exam, leading to poor performance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves 1. Identifying the specific requirements and objectives of the assessment, in this case, the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam. 2. Consulting official sources of information provided by the institution. 3. Analyzing the nature of the assessment, e.g., conceptual, analytical, problem-solving. 4. Developing a study plan that directly addresses these identified requirements and the assessment's nature. 5. Regularly reviewing and adjusting the study plan based on progress and a deeper understanding of the exam's demands. Question 11. The audit findings indicate potential irregularities in the administration of the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam, specifically concerning the handling of candidate data and the verification of examination conditions. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the university's admissions committee? Option A. Forward the audit findings directly to the university's legal department for immediate action, assuming the findings represent a clear breach of regulations requiring punitive measures. Option B. Instruct the examination proctors and administrative staff involved to provide written explanations for any noted discrepancies, without initiating a broader review of the audit's systemic implications. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive review of the audit report, cross-referencing the findings with the established protocols and regulations governing the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam, and convene a special session to discuss the implications and determine the next steps for a thorough and impartial investigation. Option D. Request a meeting with the auditors to clarify specific points in the report, with the understanding that minor discrepancies can be addressed through internal memos without a formal investigation. The correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive review of the audit report, cross-referencing the findings with the established protocols and regulations governing the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam, and convene a special session to discuss the implications and determine the next steps for a thorough and impartial investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the applicant to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of university admissions, specifically concerning the integrity of the entrance examination process. The challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to fair and transparent admissions with the potential for undue influence or preferential treatment, which could compromise the validity of the exam results and the university's reputation. Careful judgment is required to uphold the principles of academic integrity and equal opportunity. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial investigation of the audit findings, adhering strictly to the established protocols and guidelines of the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes transparency, fairness, and accountability. By initiating a formal review process that involves examining the evidence, consulting relevant regulations, and potentially interviewing involved parties, the university demonstrates its commitment to upholding the integrity of its admissions process. This aligns with the ethical obligation to ensure that all applicants are evaluated on merit and that no procedural irregularities have occurred. The regulatory framework for university entrance exams, as implicitly defined by the need for such audits, mandates a rigorous and unbiased approach to addressing any potential breaches. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings without proper investigation. This would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure, as it ignores potential systemic issues or individual misconduct that could undermine the fairness of the entrance exam. Such inaction could lead to a breach of trust with applicants, faculty, and the wider academic community, and could also expose the university to reputational damage and potential legal challenges if the irregularities are later exposed. Another incorrect approach would be to selectively address the findings based on the perceived seniority or influence of the individuals involved. This demonstrates a lack of impartiality and a failure to uphold the principle of equal treatment for all, regardless of their position within the university. It would constitute a serious ethical lapse and a violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of any regulatory framework governing fair admissions. A third incorrect approach would be to implement immediate punitive measures without a thorough investigation. While swift action might seem decisive, it risks penalizing individuals unfairly if the findings are not fully substantiated. This approach fails to respect due process and could lead to further complications and damage to morale and trust within the institution. The professional decision-making process for similar situation should involve a structured approach. First, acknowledge and document the findings. Second, consult the relevant internal policies and external regulations governing the entrance examination. Third, initiate a formal, impartial investigation to gather all necessary facts. Fourth, consult with legal counsel or ethics committees if the situation is complex or involves potential breaches of law. Fifth, determine appropriate actions based on the evidence and regulatory requirements. And finally, communicate the outcomes transparently and in accordance with established procedures. Question 12. The audit findings indicate that an admissions committee member has a close family member applying for admission to Alberto Hurtado University. The committee member is aware of this relationship and has not yet informed the admissions office or their direct supervisor. Which of the following actions best upholds the principles of integrity and fairness in the university's entrance examination process? Option A. Discreetly seek information about the applicant's performance from other committee members to gauge their standing without revealing the relationship. Option B. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the admissions office and recuse themselves from any part of the evaluation or decision-making process concerning the applicant. Option C. Downplay the closeness of the familial relationship when informing the admissions office, emphasizing that it will not influence their judgment. Option D. Proceed with evaluating the applicant's application, relying on their personal objectivity to ensure a fair assessment. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the admissions office and recuse themselves from any part of the evaluation or decision-making process concerning the applicant. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest and a breach of professional conduct. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the individual to balance their personal relationships with their professional responsibilities and ethical obligations. The university's entrance exam regulations, while not explicitly detailed here, would typically emphasize integrity, fairness, and the avoidance of situations that could compromise the impartiality of the admissions process. The core of the challenge lies in recognizing the appearance of impropriety, even if no direct manipulation occurred, and acting proactively to uphold the university's standards. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the relationship to the relevant university authority. This upholds the principle of integrity by ensuring that any potential bias is known and can be managed appropriately. It demonstrates a commitment to fairness by allowing the university to implement safeguards, such as recusal from the decision-making process or independent review, thereby protecting the integrity of the entrance exam. This aligns with the ethical imperative to act with honesty and to avoid situations that could impair professional judgment or create a conflict of interest. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with evaluating the applicant without disclosing the relationship. This fails to address the potential for bias, either perceived or actual, and violates the duty of transparency. It creates an environment where the fairness of the admissions process can be questioned, undermining public trust in the university. Another incorrect approach would be to downplay the significance of the relationship or to believe that personal objectivity is sufficient to overcome the familial connection. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the importance of perceived fairness and the potential for unconscious bias. Professional ethics often require not only the absence of impropriety, but also the absence of the appearance of impropriety. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to attempt to subtly influence the evaluation process in favor of the applicant, even if done with the intention of helping them. This is a direct breach of professional integrity and constitutes a serious ethical violation, as it compromises the fairness and objectivity of the admissions process. Professionals in such situations should follow a clear decision-making framework. 1. Identify the potential conflict of interest or ethical concern. 2. Consult relevant university policies and professional codes of conduct. 3. Disclose the situation promptly and transparently to the appropriate authority. 4. Follow the guidance provided by the authority regarding recusal or other conflict management strategies. 5. Maintain confidentiality and objectivity throughout the process. Question 13. The audit findings indicate that a professor, who is also a member of the board of directors for a private company, has submitted a research grant proposal to the university from that same company. The professor has not disclosed this dual role to the university's research grant committee. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the university to address this situation? Option A. Request the professor to resign from their board position with the company before the grant proposal can be considered by the university. Option B. Advise the professor to withdraw their grant proposal to avoid any appearance of impropriety without further investigation into the specifics of the conflict. Option C. Immediately initiate a formal review of the professor's grant proposal and their board membership by the university's ethics committee to assess and manage the potential conflict of interest. Option D. Allow the grant proposal to proceed through the normal review process, assuming the professor will recuse themselves from any discussions or decisions directly related to their company's proposal. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a formal review of the professor's grant proposal and their board membership by the university's ethics committee to assess and manage the potential conflict of interest. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest involving a faculty member who is also a board member of a company seeking a research grant from the university. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity and ethical conduct with the faculty member's professional responsibilities and potential benefits from the collaboration. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions regarding the grant are made impartially and in the best interest of the university and its students, free from undue influence. The correct approach involves immediate disclosure of the potential conflict of interest to the relevant university authorities, such as the ethics committee or the dean's office. This proactive step allows for an objective assessment of the situation and the implementation of appropriate mitigation strategies, which could include recusal from decision-making processes related to the grant. This aligns with the ethical principles of transparency and impartiality, which are fundamental to maintaining trust and integrity within academic institutions. University regulations, often mirroring broader ethical guidelines for research and academic administration, typically mandate such disclosures to prevent conflicts from compromising research quality or institutional reputation. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the grant application and review process without disclosing the faculty member's dual role. This failure to disclose is a direct violation of ethical principles and likely university policy, as it conceals information that could influence the impartiality of the decision-making process. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to manage the conflict internally without formal oversight, such as the faculty member unilaterally deciding to abstain from voting on their own company's grant. This lacks the necessary transparency and accountability, as it bypasses established university procedures for conflict of interest management and leaves room for subjective interpretation and potential bias. A further incorrect approach would be to dismiss the potential conflict as insignificant without a formal review, underestimating the importance of perceived and actual impartiality in maintaining institutional credibility. Professionals in such situation should follow a structured decision-making process. First, identify the potential conflict of interest. Second, consult relevant university policies and ethical guidelines. Third, disclose the conflict to the appropriate authority. Fourth, cooperate with the established review process to determine appropriate actions, which may include recusal, divestment, or other mitigation strategies. This systematic approach ensures that conflicts are addressed transparently, ethically, and in accordance with institutional regulations, safeguarding the integrity of academic processes. Question 14. The audit findings indicate that a senior auditor, responsible for reviewing the financial statements of Alberto Hurtado University, has discovered a close personal friendship with a key manager in the university's finance department, who is directly involved in preparing the financial statements under audit. The auditor has also recently received a significant personal gift from this manager. Which of the following actions should the auditor take to uphold professional standards and ensure the integrity of the audit? Option A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and the gift to the audit committee or the designated oversight body of Alberto Hurtado University and request guidance on how to proceed, potentially including reassignment. Option B. Continue with the audit as planned, relying on personal integrity to remain objective, and do not disclose the relationship or the gift. Option C. Discuss the audit findings with a friend in the finance department to understand their perspective before finalizing the report. Option D. Resign from the audit engagement immediately without informing the university of the specific reason for resignation. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and the gift to the audit committee or the designated oversight body of Alberto Hurtado University and request guidance on how to proceed, potentially including reassignment. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest and a breach of professional conduct. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the auditor to balance their duty to the university with their personal relationships and potential financial entanglements. Careful judgment is required to ensure objectivity and maintain the integrity of the audit process. The correct approach involves immediately disclosing the relationship and potential conflict to the audit committee or the designated oversight body within Alberto Hurtado University. This approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to the ethical principles of transparency and objectivity, which are paramount in auditing. By disclosing the conflict, the auditor allows the university to take appropriate steps, such as reassigning the audit or implementing enhanced review procedures, thereby safeguarding the audit's independence and credibility. This aligns with the general principles of professional ethics that require individuals to avoid situations where their personal interests could compromise their professional judgment. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the audit without disclosure, assuming personal integrity is sufficient to maintain objectivity. This fails to acknowledge the perception of bias and the potential for unconscious influence, which can undermine the audit's credibility. It also violates the principle of transparency, as stakeholders are not made aware of potential conflicts. Another incorrect approach would be to resign from the audit without proper notification or explanation to the university. While this avoids the direct conflict, it can leave the university without adequate audit coverage and may be perceived as an evasion of responsibility rather than a proactive measure to ensure audit integrity. A third incorrect approach would be to discuss the audit findings with the relative before the official reporting. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and professional ethics, as audit information is sensitive and should only be communicated through established channels and at the appropriate time. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a systematic evaluation of potential conflicts of interest. Professionals should first identify any relationships or circumstances that could impair their objectivity. If a potential conflict is identified, the next step is to assess its significance and impact on the professional engagement. If the conflict cannot be mitigated to an acceptable level, disclosure to the relevant oversight body is the most appropriate course of action. This allows for informed decisions regarding the continuation of the engagement or the implementation of safeguards. Maintaining open communication and adhering to ethical guidelines are crucial for preserving professional integrity. Question 15. The efficiency study reveals that the Alberto Hurtado University's entrance exam evaluation process is experiencing delays, potentially impacting the timely notification of applicants. To address this, the admissions committee is considering several strategies to expedite the process. Which of the following strategies best aligns with the university's commitment to fair and transparent admission while improving operational efficiency? Option A. Reducing the number of faculty members involved in the final review stage to speed up the consensus-building process. Option B. Implementing a phased review system where initial screening is automated based on predefined minimum scores, followed by a more detailed manual review of shortlisted candidates by experienced faculty. Option C. Extending the application deadline to accommodate the current evaluation pace, thereby managing applicant expectations. Option D. Introducing a new, simplified scoring rubric that assigns a single numerical value to each essay response, bypassing qualitative assessment. Correct answer is B. Implementing a phased review system where initial screening is automated based on predefined minimum scores, followed by a more detailed manual review of shortlisted candidates by experienced faculty. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals that the university's admissions process, particularly the evaluation of entrance exam performance, is taking longer than anticipated, impacting timely communication with prospective students. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for thorough and fair evaluation with the university's commitment to timely and transparent communication. The pressure to expedite processes must not compromise the integrity of the admissions decision-making, which is governed by the Alberto Hurtado University's internal regulations and ethical principles of fairness and equity. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the current evaluation methodology to identify bottlenecks without altering the core criteria for admission. This entails analyzing the steps involved in scoring, reviewing, and finalizing results, and then implementing targeted improvements such as digitalizing certain stages or reallocating resources. This approach is ethically and regulatorily sound, as it upholds the principles of fairness and due process enshrined in the Alberto Hurtado University's admission guidelines. It ensures that all candidates are evaluated against the same established standards, and that any efficiency gains do not introduce bias or compromise the quality of assessment. An incorrect approach would be to immediately reduce the time allocated for reviewing each application, or to implement a simplified scoring system that overlooks nuanced aspects of a candidate's performance. This would be a failure to adhere to the university's established academic standards and could lead to unfair or inaccurate assessments, violating the principle of equitable treatment for all applicants. Another incorrect approach would be to outsource the final decision-making to an external entity without adequate oversight or clear guidelines, which would abdicate the university's responsibility for its admissions process and potentially introduce external biases, contravening internal governance and ethical responsibilities. A further incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed over accuracy by rushing the verification of submitted documents, which could lead to admitting unqualified candidates or rejecting deserving ones, undermining the academic integrity of the university. Professionals tasked with improving admissions efficiency should adopt a decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the existing process and its regulatory framework. They should then identify specific areas for improvement, propose solutions that align with ethical principles and university regulations, and pilot these changes before full implementation. Continuous monitoring and evaluation are crucial to ensure that efficiency gains do not compromise fairness or academic standards. Question 16. Market research demonstrates that prospective students and their families place significant importance on the perceived academic rigor and success rates of university entrance examinations. In light of this, a member of the Alberto Hurtado University's admissions committee is considering adjusting the presentation of the most recent entrance exam results to emphasize a higher average score than was actually achieved, excluding a statistically significant portion of lower-scoring candidates from the reported average. This adjustment is intended to enhance the university's reputation. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam? Option A. Accurately report the average score based on all candidates who took the examination and provide a comprehensive analysis of the results, including score distribution and any relevant contextual factors. Option B. Report the highest individual score achieved as representative of the overall examination performance to create an impression of exceptional academic standards. Option C. Focus solely on the number of candidates admitted who achieved scores above a predefined benchmark without reporting the overall average score. Option D. Exclude the scores of candidates who performed below a certain threshold from the reported average to present a more favorable and higher average score. The correct answer is A. Accurately report the average score based on all candidates who took the examination and provide a comprehensive analysis of the results, including score distribution and any relevant contextual factors. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's need for accurate admissions data with the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the entrance examination process. The Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam regulations, as per its established guidelines, mandate strict adherence to fairness and transparency in all assessment procedures. Misrepresenting data, even with the intention of improving perceived performance, undermines the credibility of the examination and the university itself. The correct approach involves a commitment to data integrity and transparent reporting. This means accurately reflecting the results of the entrance examination as they are, without manipulation. The university's guidelines for the entrance exam emphasize the importance of objective assessment and the ethical responsibility of all involved parties to uphold these standards. Any attempt to artificially inflate scores or misrepresent performance metrics would violate these core principles of academic integrity and ethical conduct expected of university personnel. An incorrect approach that involves fabricating or altering examination results to present a more favorable picture to stakeholders would constitute a serious ethical breach and a violation of the university's examination regulations. Such actions erode trust, compromise the validity of the admissions process, and could lead to disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach, such as selectively highlighting only positive outcomes while omitting negative ones, is a form of data distortion that misleads stakeholders and fails to provide a true representation of the examination's effectiveness. This also contravenes the principles of transparency and accountability inherent in the university's examination framework. Professionals faced with such situations should employ a decision-making process rooted in ethical principles and regulatory compliance. This involves first identifying the core, objective, accurate reporting, and then evaluating potential actions against the established rules and ethical codes of the institution. When faced with pressure to present data in a misleading way, the professional decision-making process should prioritize honesty, transparency, and adherence to the specific regulations governing the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam. Consulting with supervisors or ethics committees can also be a crucial step when navigating complex ethical dilemmas. Question 17. The audit findings indicate a discrepancy in the access logs for student academic records, suggesting a potential unauthorized access or mishandling of sensitive student information. As the data protection officer for Alberto Hurtado University, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action to address these findings while adhering to university regulations and data privacy principles? Option A. Initiate a confidential internal investigation to identify the nature and scope of the discrepancy, reviewing access logs and data handling procedures without broad disclosure of student data. Option B. Inform the auditors that the university's internal policies prohibit the disclosure of student academic records and access logs due to privacy concerns, and offer no further cooperation. Option C. Immediately provide the auditors with full access to all student academic records and associated access logs for their review. Option D. Instruct the IT department to immediately purge all potentially compromised access logs to prevent further unauthorized access. The correct answer is C. Immediately provide the auditors with full access to all student academic records and associated access logs for their review. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations regarding student data privacy. The audit findings suggest a potential breach or a significant risk of one, necessitating a prompt and responsible response. The core of the challenge lies in adhering to the principles of data protection as mandated by relevant Chilean regulations, which are likely to be reflected in the Alberto Hurtado University's internal policies and the broader legal framework governing educational institutions. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation that respects student privacy while fulfilling the audit's objective. This means identifying the root cause of the data discrepancy without unnecessarily exposing sensitive student information. The university must act diligently to understand the nature and extent of the issue, implement corrective measures, and ensure future compliance. This aligns with the principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and accountability, which are fundamental to data protection laws. Specifically, it requires a systematic review of access logs, data handling procedures, and security protocols, all while maintaining confidentiality. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disclose all student records to the auditors without a proper assessment of necessity or a clear legal basis. This would violate student privacy rights and potentially contravene data protection legislation. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the audit findings or delay the investigation, which demonstrates a lack of accountability and could exacerbate any existing data security issues, leading to further regulatory scrutiny and reputational damage. Furthermore, attempting to rectify the issue by simply deleting records without understanding the cause or documenting the process would be irresponsible and could hinder a proper investigation, failing to address the underlying systemic problem. Professionals in such situations should follow a structured decision-making process. First, understand the scope and implications of the audit findings. Second, consult relevant internal policies and external regulations concerning data privacy and university operations. Third, engage relevant stakeholders, such as the IT department, legal counsel, and data protection officers, to ensure a comprehensive and compliant response. Fourth, conduct a thorough, documented investigation, prioritizing data security and privacy throughout. Finally, implement appropriate corrective actions and preventative measures, and communicate findings transparently to relevant parties as required by policy and law. Question 18. The audit findings indicate that the auditor responsible for reviewing the integrity of the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam has a close personal friendship with a candidate whose application is currently under review. This relationship could potentially influence the auditor's judgment or create an appearance of bias. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the auditor to ensure compliance with the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines? Option A. Immediately disclose the personal friendship and potential conflict of interest to the designated university committee responsible for the entrance exam, allowing them to determine the appropriate next steps, which may include reassigning the audit. Option B. Inform the university that the personal friendship is not significant enough to warrant any changes to the audit plan, downplaying its potential impact. Option C. Proceed with the audit as planned, but make a mental note to be extra vigilant in ensuring objectivity, without informing the university of the personal relationship. Option D. Resign from the audit assignment immediately without providing a detailed explanation to the university to avoid any perceived conflict. Correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the personal friendship and potential conflict of interest to the designated university committee responsible for the entrance exam, allowing them to determine the appropriate next steps, which may include reassigning the audit. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest and a breach of professional conduct. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the auditor to balance their duty to the university with their personal relationships and potential financial entanglements. The university's entrance exam regulations, which are paramount, likely contain specific clauses regarding auditor independence and the avoidance of conflicts of interest to ensure the integrity of the admission process. Careful judgment is required to uphold these standards. The correct approach involves immediately disclosing the relationship and potential conflict to the appropriate university authority, as stipulated by the Alberto Hurtado University Entrance Exam Regulations. This proactive disclosure allows the university to assess the situation and implement necessary safeguards, such as reassigning the audit or implementing enhanced oversight. This aligns with the ethical principles of transparency and integrity, ensuring that the audit process is perceived as fair and unbiased, thereby protecting the credibility of the entrance exam. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the audit without disclosure would be a direct violation of the university's entrance exam regulations concerning auditor independence and conflicts of interest. This failure to disclose creates an appearance of impropriety, undermining the audit's objectivity and potentially compromising the fairness of the entrance exam results. Another incorrect approach of attempting to downplay the significance of the relationship to the university authorities would also be a breach of professional ethics. This misrepresentation, even if subtle, demonstrates a lack of candor and a failure to adhere to the spirit of the regulations, which demand full and honest disclosure of any circumstances that could impair independence. A further incorrect approach of resigning from the audit without proper notification or explanation to the university would be unprofessional. While it avoids direct involvement, it leaves the university unaware of the potential conflict and unable to make informed decisions about the audit's continuity or reassignment, thus failing in the duty of care and professional responsibility. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a thorough understanding of the relevant university entrance exam regulations, particularly those pertaining to auditor conduct, independence, and conflict of interest. Upon identifying a potential conflict, the professional must prioritize immediate and full disclosure to the designated university body responsible for overseeing the entrance exam process. This allows for a structured and transparent resolution, safeguarding the integrity of the examination and upholding professional standards. Question 19. The audit findings indicate a potential discrepancy in student enrollment data that requires immediate investigation. To verify these findings, the audit team needs to access specific student academic records. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with data privacy regulations and university policy? Option A. Contact individual students directly to request their academic records for audit purposes. Option B. Request the IT department to provide a data extract of all student academic records for the audit team to review. Option C. Directly access the student academic records through the university's internal system to expedite the verification process. Option D. Initiate a formal request to the university's Data Protection Officer, DPO, to obtain authorized access to the necessary student academic records, outlining the specific data required and the audit's purpose. The correct answer is C. Directly access the student academic records through the university's internal system to expedite the verification process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations regarding student data privacy. The audit findings suggest a potential breach of confidentiality, necessitating a careful and compliant response. The core of the challenge lies in determining how to access necessary information for the audit without violating the principles of data protection and student rights as enshrined in relevant Chilean regulations and Alberto Hurtado University's internal policies. The correct approach involves initiating a formal request through established university channels, specifically engaging the Data Protection Officer, DPO, or the equivalent designated authority responsible for overseeing privacy matters. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principle of least privilege and due process. By involving the DPO, the university ensures that any access to student data is authorized, documented, and conducted in a manner that minimizes privacy risks. This aligns with the spirit of data protection laws, which mandate that access to personal information should be limited to what is necessary for a specific, legitimate purpose and should be overseen by designated privacy professionals. This process respects student privacy rights and maintains the integrity of the audit. An incorrect approach would be to directly access student records without explicit authorization, even if the intention is to expedite the audit. This violates the fundamental principles of data privacy and confidentiality. Such an action could lead to disciplinary measures, legal repercussions, and a severe erosion of trust between students and the university. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on informal requests or verbal assurances from administrative staff without a formal, documented process. This lacks accountability and transparency, making it difficult to verify compliance and potentially leaving the university vulnerable to accusations of mishandling sensitive information. Finally, ignoring the audit findings or delaying a formal response would be a failure to uphold the university's commitment to good governance and regulatory compliance, potentially exacerbating any identified issues. Professionals in such situations should follow a structured decision-making process. First, identify the core issue and the relevant regulations or policies. Second, consult with the designated authority, e.g., DPO, to understand the proper procedure. Third, execute the authorized process meticulously, ensuring all actions are documented. And fourth, communicate transparently with relevant stakeholders about the steps being taken and the outcomes. Question 20. The audit findings indicate a potential discrepancy in the handling of student application data, raising concerns about data privacy and compliance with university regulations. The university's internal audit department has completed its review and is awaiting guidance on how to proceed with communicating these findings to relevant stakeholders. Option A. Initiate a confidential internal review process involving relevant data protection officers and legal counsel to assess the findings and determine appropriate, compliant next steps for remediation and communication. Option B. Disregard the audit findings as they are preliminary and may not reflect a significant issue, focusing instead on ongoing admissions processes. Option C. Immediately release the full audit report to all university departments and student representatives to ensure complete transparency. Option D. Publicly announce that an audit has identified potential data handling issues, without providing any specific details, to preemptively address concerns. The correct answer is C. Immediately release the full audit report to all university departments and student representatives to ensure complete transparency. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect student data privacy. The audit findings suggest a potential breach of confidentiality, necessitating a careful and compliant response. The core of the challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of disclosure without violating the principles of data protection as enshrined in the relevant regulations governing educational institutions in Chile, which would be the framework for the Alberto Hurtado University entrance exam. The correct approach involves a measured response that prioritizes data security and legal compliance. This means acknowledging the audit's findings without revealing specific details that could identify individuals or compromise the integrity of the investigation. The university must initiate an internal review process, adhering to its own policies and any applicable data protection laws. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant because it respects the privacy rights of students and staff, while still addressing the audit's concerns through established internal procedures. It avoids premature or unauthorized disclosure, which could lead to further breaches, legal repercussions, and damage to the university's reputation. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disclose the full audit report to all stakeholders. This would be a direct violation of data privacy principles, as it would expose sensitive information about individuals and potentially ongoing investigations without proper authorization or a legitimate need to know. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the audit findings altogether. This demonstrates a disregard for accountability and regulatory compliance, potentially exacerbating any existing issues and leaving the university vulnerable to further scrutiny and penalties. Finally, selectively disclosing information to certain parties while withholding it from others, without a clear, justifiable, and legally defensible reason, would also be an ethically and regulatorily unsound practice, potentially leading to accusations of bias or cover-up. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the scope of the audit findings and identifying the specific regulations and university policies that apply. This involves consulting with legal counsel and the university's data protection officer to ensure all actions are compliant. The next step is to develop a communication strategy that is transparent about the process being undertaken without compromising confidentiality. This often involves informing relevant internal bodies and initiating a formal internal investigation or review. The focus should always be on remediation and prevention, rather than blame or public disclosure of sensitive details.